What's up, YouTube? It's your boy Phalanx Speaks back. Another video. Saw Captain America Brave New World. Yeah. Sam Wilson, the Falcon, now takes on the mantle of Captain America and is faced with a number of things, both internal and external. Not going to spoil it. But what I'm trying to figure out is all the hate. What's all the hate about? And it's the typical people, online who pretty much have a vendetta against Marvel. Some of them guys are guys that are actually trying to be rivals to Marvel and push their own stuff, own comic books and all of that, and that I can actually respect to a degree, because that's just business. But then there's others whose agenda I can't quite figure out. I have my hunches. I could probably guess based on what it's typically about. But, I don't rush to that judgment right there. I'm just going to say, try to give you some things to think about. So, MCU goes the route of getting rid of Steve Rogers. Now, whether you want to consider it death or whether you want to consider it just him deciding to age himself by going back in time in order to be with his true love, Betty Carter, right? So, I don't know. I still believe they've left room for Steve Rogers to come back, and really somewhere in my heart of hearts, I want to see Steve Rogers come back. Why? Steve Rogers, for me, is one of my favorite characters, right? In all of not just Marvel, but just comic book creation at all. I think he's an ingenious character. But I think he's a character that's oftentimes misunderstood, because if you get caught up in Steve Rogers outwardly, blonde hair, blue eyes, and not understand the man who Steve Rogers is, meaning the ultimate idealist, American idealist, I think you miss the whole point of where they're going now with Brave New World. Now, I'm not one of these people that believe Marvel makes all the right moves and all the right decisions and so on. But I'm under no illusion when it comes to art and expectations when it comes to Hollywood. Why? Because I understand something about Hollywood, and I understand something about its history from a standpoint that many of you probably wouldn't or haven't considered. You see, art typically reflects life. And when you talk about these content creators, here I'm talking about filmmakers, people who write movies and who write stories and books and so on, that's what you'll find. I don't care if you're talking about anything from Lord of the Rings that reflected World War II reality, or if you're talking about something like Game of Thrones, which reflects the ideology of its creator when it comes to war, or if you're talking about Marvel. And if you're talking about Steve Rogers is a character that was born in the environment of World War II environment. He's a character of irony, because the enemy that he's fighting is the Germans. Early on, you had pictures of Captain America knocking out Adolf Hitler. You see, this was World War II propaganda. And the irony of Steve Rogers is this. Adolf Hitler, who was the enemy in World War II, had an ideology. And that ideology was about the superior human being, the superior man. The superior man in the ideology of Adolf Hitler was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, athletic man. And that's exactly what Steve Rogers is. But the irony of Steve Rogers is, though that's his outward shell, his inward reality, who he really is something completely different. He's the opposite. Steve Rogers being the underdog. And I'm only going over this because I think some people miss who Steve Rogers is, and that it causes them to misunderstand kind of where Marvel is going now, where Kevin Feige is going now with Sam Wilson. Steve Rogers, being the underdog who was bullied, develops a certain mindset. And that mind, but he's a bully guy he has all the right stuff on the inside. Self-sacrifice, which is a sign or the telltale sign of a Marvel character. If you look at any Marvel character, whether it's in the MCU or whether it's in the comic books, because I've been reading comic books since the 80s, self-sacrifice is the true mark of every Marvel character. And if you look at these stories, every single last one of them have to come to this realization that this whole thing is about being willing to sacrifice oneself in order to save humanity. And that's what it's all about. This is what Marvel does. One could call Marvel almost like a death cult, honestly. Marvel superheroism. This is the telltale sign that caused the Doctor and Betty Carter and them to choose him to take the serum, as we know from Captain America 1. This guy, when they throw the grenade out there, he jumps on the grenade and he doesn't want anyone else to die, right? This is Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers takes on the mantle of Captain America, right? America, this great country that we are a part of. And I mean great in terms of prominence, in terms of, in terms of invention, all of these different things. And Steve Rogers is a guy that's a patriot, but he's a patriot in the real sense, in the sense of being this idealist who has personal principles that encompass honor, principles that encompass toughness, righteousness, all of these different things. And he's faced with a world that needs that. So he's the inspiration towards that. Now, what I don't understand is this criticism of what people are calling, wokeness, or this criticism of what people are calling, I don't know what it is. Many of you are more familiar with this rhetoric than I am. What I don't get is why people would act like this is something new with Marvel. As I said earlier, art reflects life. Art reflects life, and it reflects the times. The times when Captain America was born in was World War II times. The times now we're faced with a number of different things, number of different issues. You have people that are out here feeling like they've been wronged and they want it righted and so on. And I'm trying to figure out, why are people trying to present this as something new? This has always been the case. Many of you don't understand Hollywood, I think, or you just being in denial about the reality of Hollywood. Okay, it isn't like Hollywood was great 20 years ago. Now all of a sudden it's bad. Why? I think it's a matter of perspective. Do you know that Hollywood, in its history, its first blockbuster movie ever was a movie called The Birth of a Nation? And of course, I'm not talking about what Nate did, a few years ago. I'm talking about Birth of a Nation, which is a movie that came out in the 1920s. Do you know that in this movie, which was one of those silent films, this is the first blockbuster, meaning millions of people, went to go see it, was a movie in which the villains and the heroes were very interesting. The scene of the movie, the setting, the plot, was the victim was the American white woman was under attack from this villain. The villain were black men coming into the city and coming into the towns. Now, in this movie, the black men were actually white men. Okay, the actors were white men in what you call blackface. Okay, they paint their face black, make their lips all big, and all of this kind of stuff. And these black men were going through the town, coming after white women to do God knows what to them. You could imagine, right? And you know who the heroes was, but then they say, don't worry, heroes are here. You know what the heroes were? Hollywood movie, blockbuster film. The heroes were the Ku Klux Klan coming in on horseback with their little punk ass masks on, and coming to save the white woman from these villainous black men who just want them, and so on. This was the theme of Hollywood. Okay? Now, people want to get rid of where it is now to return to something else, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what that is. If you understand this, and you understand that was what? A reflection of a certain time. And what you see on art and you see on film was a reflection of that. Look at Flash Gordon, a famous hero from the 1940s. Who was his main villain? Oh, it was a guy called Ming the Merciless, right? A Chinese or Japanese looking person, which just so happened to have come out during the time around World War II, when the villains were what? The Japanese. And in the 50s, you had the Koreans and so on, right? So this is what Hollywood is. So I was always confused. I did a review of the movie Captain Marvel a few years ago. You know, Brie Larson who's hated because of statements that she made about, you know, privilege and so on at an award show. So she's just attacked, right? You can't be talking about certain types of people, certain demographics of people, right? So she's hated. So Captain Marvel never stood a chance, just simply because of that. But the movie Captain Marvel, people don't realize, is kind of like a reflection of what's going on in the Middle East, right? You got this one group of people that people view as ugly, according to their view. They're ugly, they're backwards, they're this, don't have the technology. And then you have this beautiful Roman Empire-ish type of people called the Kree, you know, who just pretty much are like the Roman Empire of the galaxy going around, and they're depicted as these beautiful people with all this technology and all this advancement and so on. They're supreme intelligences and AI and all of that type of stuff. But what we find out is the irony that the ugly ones, the ugly shapeshifters, are actually the oppressed, whereas the beautiful, technologically advanced ones were really the evil ones in there. And this is what people are missing. But no, they want to focus on an attack on men. They believe that comes from women, which I'm always confused by. Like, if you're a man and you're men and you feel like women are complaining about something, why do you feel threatened to it? I'm not even gonna get into that. You know, some of you, I'm gonna let y'all have y'all little thing. But anyway, the point is, art reflects life. And if you understand Steve Rogers and who he is, and how he later ultimately, after sacrificing himself all these different times and coming back and helping the Avengers to save the world, throughout Marvel, and I'm gonna tell you, like, no matter what you think of Marvel right now, and every movie, first of all, ain't all that. Every movie ain't all that. But some people putting out this narrative that Marvel was so excellent every single movie all the time until all of a sudden, you know, they just got woke. You know, well, I'm going to tell you, Thor 1 really wasn't all that, and I didn't even like Dark World that much, to be honest with you. But Ragnarok, I think, was all that, and of course we know the trash that is Love and Thunder. But whatever the case may be, despite how you feel, from Iron Man 1, which I believe was the first one, or if you want to include the first Hulk, which was bad, but from Iron Man 1 all the way to Endgame, in my opinion, is the best film that I've seen, as far as putting a story together and tying together all these different storylines to culminate in this battle against this villain Thanos, who is a titan and is the ultimate villain. I thought, I've never seen film that done that great, ever. That is the greatest film I've seen. Just all of that as it culminated. All right, but somewhere along the line, it became popular to shit on Marvel now because they not living up to that particular standard. And I will say, yeah, there's been some movies out there that haven't lived up to that standard, but even with that, I didn't think every movie was so 100% great. And no, I don't like the fact that T'Challa was not recasted. That's probably the thing I don't like more than anything. Is that Black Panther happens to be the character, T'Challa just happens to be the character we're going to like kill off because the actor died. Even though you notice the guy who played Ross in this movie here, Captain America, was replaced by Harrison Ford, and so on. Blows my mind. But anyway, on to the movie. Sam is faced with a situation carrying the mantle for a guy that's you would call Mr. Perfect. Blonde hair, blue eyes, handsome guy, who was a war hero during the time when America was great and everything, right? How do you replace Steve Rogers? But what people don't understand about Steve Rogers is Steve Rogers was never one of those guys. Steve Rogers, honestly, is the wokest guy like you can ever come up with. Like, to be honest with you, I'm not talking about the immoral things that people associate with wokeness, but wokeness really comes from being born in a situation where it's like this, okay? The government is doing X, Y, Z, and trying to take the nation in the wrong way, and you oppose it based on principles that you have. Ultimately, just being aware. That's the idea, as opposed to being asleep. When you're asleep, you don't get it. Even though I don't consider myself a woke person, meaning I'm not part of that particular movement. I'm from a movement that's my mindset is more of something that predates all of that, right? I'm too up on, like say Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson. I'm more from that line of thought. Malcolm X, I'm more from that line of thought, that train of thought. And really, those men would never agree with everything that so-called wokeness stands for now, right? So I wouldn't fit that. But the point is, when you critique any of these types of things or ideas, you should do so with a type of fairness, okay? And with the intent to help them. Not to see them as some enemy that's beneath you that should be squashed like a bug. That should not be what America is about, right? So that's what I'm saying, okay? But at any rate, Steve Rogers, if you understand from the comic books, and I'm a reader of his comic books and everything, Steve Rogers' his whole story, he's constantly opposing the U.S. government all the time. He's constantly opposing these things. Why? Because he's the ultimate idealist. And an idealist like him, with the exception of some of those times, those fringe comic books where they went off that path, but the original Steve Rogers is the ultimate idealist who sees America as what it should be and is always embodying that. And when that's not happening, even when it's under the president, he's opposing that, okay? And what I'm saying is, without spoiling Brave New World, is basically it's the same similar theme. Okay, it's just that the Captain America is not a blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy. Now, he's a black guy, and he's a black guy who I think is a real black guy. And what I mean by that is he's true to wanting the good for his people, but also at the same time understanding what he has to represent for the whole of America, as a whole, And he's a guy that what I like about it is that he was the best friend, or the second best friend, probably after Bucky, of Steve Rogers. So he understands that man. He understands everything that what he did and symbolized and stood for. And he's the perfect guy to carry on the mantle because of that. Now, as far as the movie, he's always struggling with this. Am I good enough? Should I be the guy? And am I good enough from a standpoint of, do I have the ability? So he questions himself whether or not he should have taken the serum so that he could live up to the mantle, because he feels like, losing a fight or coming short. Now, I'm not trying to be spoily, but these are the struggles he's having within. And then on the outside, he's worried about, the way things look and so on. And I'm not going to spoil the plot, but he's trying to save a friend of his that he knows was, put in a bad situation and so on. And this causes him to have to oppose the president, who in this situation is, our old friend Ross. And I heard some people didn't like Harrison Ford as a choice, and maybe they weren't familiar with who Ross was. Ross is an older man, and I think the character probably died. Last time we saw him was on Black Widow, which is another movie people criticize a lot, and I don't get it. I thought Black Widow was great. Now, I get some people don't like the way the Red Guardian was depicted as a goofball and so on, and it looks like he will continue to be depicted as such. And what I don't understand about that is, well, the Red Guardian is not the main character. He's a side character, and the main character is a woman, right? So they're saying men are depicted as weak and fragile and insecure in the face of a woman. Well, that's what happens when the woman is the hero and she's dealing with men. Now, maybe they go over the top a little bit here and there, but at the end of the day, that's coming from people who represent a segment of society who are not accustomed to being portrayed as clowns or being portrayed as villainous. Okay? Now, me being from a demographic that's kind of used to that, I'm used to Steven Seagal, going through the damn city and running through a whole damn Jamaican posse, which was villainous back in the 80s, or stuff like that, where black guys are exploited for saying, jive, turkey, and this and that, and then getting their ass kicked by Bruce Lee. You know what I mean? And jive turkey, which all my old heads told me no black man's ever said ever. But what I'm saying is, okay, art kind of reflects life, and right now, that demographic, which is the white male, is going through a period of being critiqued and criticized by some others. And what I'm saying is, just man up. That's all I'm saying. Now, you can, of course, always fight back and articulate that, but this big, acting like this big, overwhelming conspiracy against the white male that is just being portrayed by Hollywood right now and all of that, and that, I'm saying, dude, trust me. Hollywood is about money, and it's about reflecting life, the way they see it. Now, sometimes they're hiring people that have agendas and so on. Listen, all of that's going to happen, and I'm telling you, it's nothing new. The first damn blockbuster was about the Ku Klux Klan being heroes. All right, and the nature of this world is that it's cyclical, right? Symbolically, right? After spring, you're always going to have summer. After summer, you're always going to have fall. After fall, you're going to have winter. And then ultimately, it's always going to go back to spring. So it's going to be cyclical. And that's part of what you're seeing right now, right? With the new King Musk, who's really is in charge of America, and then his little lackey, the president. You see that happening in some of that, in that form. Like in the creation, things just kind of, I'm not going to say correct themselves, but things come to a head. And that's kind of what's happening. But overall, I give Captain America Brave New World a solid 8. I think it served the purpose. I'm not going to say it's the greatest of all. Marvel has really, their bar is very high for what they've done so far. But overall, without trying to spoil whatever, man, I liked it. I don't think it was anywhere as bad as half of these people are saying. There was a lot of people who decided it was just going to be bad before they even saw it. And I think that's just BS to do that. And tell me what y'all think, man. If you saw it, peace out.